We're talking best tips for the math section of the ACT today. So in this video, we're gonna give you my top 5 tips, as well as a bonus tip at the end. But one thing that this video is not, it's not your common sense tips like, sleep good the night before, eat a good breakfast, bring extra pencils. We all know that. So I want to tell you just math tips in this video. So therefore, let's get into the first tip on the math section of the ACT. All right, tip number 1 is to focus on the first 30 problems, all right? And that's because these are your type of problems that are your pre-algebra, algebra 1, and geometry, which we should probably have all taken by the time we take the ACT. So we should be familiar with those and be able to get those questions right. Now, if you can get all 30 of those first 30 questions right, of the 60 total, then you're gonna get about a 19 to 21 out of that total 36 on the ACT. However, that's before you bubble in the rest. We all bubble in the rest when we take the ACT. We don't leave anything blank, right? So then if you bubble in the rest, that's gonna add 2 to 3, maybe even 4 more points onto that. It's giving you possibly 24 or 25 out of 36 on the ACT. Those of you stuck in the teens right now, I know you would take anything in the 20s, so focus on this tip, just the first 30 questions, to help raise your score. All right, tip number 2 is that your answers are written in order. Start with the smallest, working their way up to the largest ones, all right? And so this is important for 2 reasons to know that they are in order. The first reason is maybe you don't know what some of these fractions are. If they give you some weird fractions, maybe mixed with decimals, fractions, and then integers, right? You don't know the order of those, and when it comes to plugging those back in, it's important sometimes that you know the order and which goes where, all right? The second reason though is, let's say you do have to plug in the answer. It's the fastest way to solve the problem, okay? You wanna start always with the middle one. Let's see what happens if you don't do that first, all right? If I were to start with this top one, and let's say the answer down here is 2 pi, all right? If I start with this top one and realize, oh, that's too small, so then I plug in the next one. 2 is still too small, pi is too small, 3 pi is too small. That took me 1, 2, 3, 4 different tries before I finally got the correct answer at 2 pi. All right. However, if I start in the middle at pi here and I realize that pi is too small, then it only takes me one more guess. All right. Let's say I try 3 pi over 2 next. So that's my first guess. 3 pi over 2 is my second guess. And I still realize that both of those are too small. I'm not going to even plug in the last one. I know that these are still too small. The only option left is 2 pi. And so that has to be the answer. Choose it, move on to the next question. All right, guys, tip number 3 is a little bit of a Hail Mary, but if you have no clue what the question's asking, look at the answers, all right? Obviously, the correct answer is right there in front of you. You just have to pick the right one. So let's say in example 1, this is just a set of answers. I don't have the question written, but if these are the answers, I'm seeing that right away, A and B start with 6, C, D, and E start with 8. I'm probably gonna go with the one that has the more 8s, right? So I'm gonna choose that one. And then the other thing I'm thinking is looking at the X's and Y's in this case, I'm seeing that the X to the 3rd, Y to the 5th, that's been repeated. That was also up here in example A, or answer A. So since I'm gonna go with the one with the 8s, I'm picking C. I don't know what the question's asking, but it's probably gonna be C because that's already been there once, okay? In example 2, I'm seeing that only 2 of these I can actually put into the calculator and figure out what the answer is. And so I might do that quick, and I'm seeing that B, I can actually throw that into the calculator without doing any extra work or knowing what sine or cosine of A and B is. Right, same thing with E. I can put this into the calculator and get a real answer. So I'm just gonna real quick put in B and E and maybe check out that last line of what the question's asking and say, maybe it's one of those numbers and maybe I'll get lucky and it'll be B and E, and check that off, especially if you're just bubbling these answers at the end, but you have time for maybe a quick problem or 2. This is a great strategy. Hey guys, before we get to tip number 4, if this video has helped you out at all, if you're gonna use these tips on the actual ACT when you take it, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button down below, that way this video can spread to more people and they can do well in the ACT just like you're gonna do. All right, tip number 4 is pretty simple. It's just don't read everything, okay? Especially on geometry problems. Usually there's gonna be an X or a question mark or some sort of unknown that you have to solve for. And also typically there's gonna be lots and lots of information just kind of setting up the problem. This might say there's a right triangle where one of the legs is 4, one of the legs is 3. Find the missing value or find the hypotenuse, okay? Just looking at the picture, you know that, and you know right away, if you know what a 3, 4, 5 right triangle is, the answer has to be 5. So don't waste your time reading everything. Just maybe look at the picture or the diagram. Now, there are some instances where you might have to read that last line and see what the question is asking if it's really long, but that last line is usually enough in the math section of the ACT to get you what you need. All right, tip number 5 is pretty simple. It's just know your calculator, all right? I actually use this one. This is just a simple TI calculator. This one cannot graph. It can't do a whole lot of things. There's no Y equals, no graph button or anything like that on there. but it does your basics. It has a square root, it can square things, right? Add, subtract, multiply, divide. And I actually got a 36 out of 36 on a practice ACT that I took last year. Now, granted, I am a math teacher, but some of my students will even come up to me and be like, where's the square root button on my calculator? You need to know where that is before you take the ACT. Know your calculator well before you take the test. All right, I promised you one bonus tip, but before we get to that, comment down below, when are you taking the ACT? If you comment your test date down below, I personally will wish you luck down in the comments, all right? But the last tip, the bonus tip here, is to know your basic formulas before you take the ACT. All right, so let me go through a few of these. I'm not gonna go into detail. If you want to know more about these, it's gonna be your responsibility to look that up on your own. All right, this is the slope formula, all right? Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1. This one is your slope-intercept form of an equation or of a line. This is your point slope form of a line. This is your standard form of a line. And then down here is the quadratic equation, all right? This should say b squared. I think it got wiped off a little bit. All right, this next one, you need to know how to kind of FOIL or distribute multiple times with binomials. Okay, this is called foiling. This next one is your Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This is the area of a circle and the circumference of a circle. You also need to know mean, median, and mode when it comes to statistics questions on the ACT. I squared, if you have I squared, that equals a -1. Not necessarily 5, but anything with an exclamation point. The exclamation point means a factorial. This means you have to do 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, anything below it of that number. 6 would be 6 times 5 times 4, and so on. Okay, you also have some log properties. So if you have this as an equation, it equals that, all right? 8 to the x is 64, and you can easily solve for x. X, of course, would be 2 in that one. Okay, and then the last one, you need to know sine, cosine, and tangent when it comes to right triangle geometry. And of course, the word that we've all known or used for that is SOHCAHTOA. I hope this video was helpful for you. You might also find this video helpful as you continue studying for the math section of the ACT.